Welcome to the BASH 101 video series. This series will focus on topics related to the Bird Wildlife Aircraft Strike Hazard Team's goal of preserving warfighting capabilities through the reduction of wildlife hazards to aircraft operations. This video will focus on implementing the formal wildlife survey requirements as described in DAFI 91-212. Wildlife surveys are an essential tool for identifying wildlife hazards, which provide leadership with data to evaluate the effectiveness of their BASH program and help them determine where they can focus limited resources to reduce risk. The presence and behavior of wildlife on an airfield is dynamic and can be influenced by many variables. Because of this, surveys should be conducted at varying times in the morning, in the evening, and at night, and throughout all seasons of the year. The goal of wildlife surveys is to capture when, where, and how wildlife is using the airfield to thrive. Data collected can be used to determine actionable risk mitigation measures. The BASH program manager or delegated equivalent should lead the installation formal wildlife survey program. Anyone, not just safety personnel, can be designated and trained as part of the survey team by the BASH program manager. What are the considerations when conducting a wildlife survey? At a minimum, survey data collected must include date and time, the wildlife location, the wildlife species observed, the number of individuals for all species present, the habitat being used by the wildlife, and observed wildlife behavior. These 6 items ensure that the collected data is both standardized and useful. When we document this specific information, the Safety Office can identify daily and seasonal trends, the use of various habitat types, for example, grassland, trees, water sources, or bare dirt, specific species that are using the airfield, and even identify unusual changes in expected wildlife behavior, which can be investigated by the Safety Office for risks to flying operations. The most common survey method is the point count survey, where surveyors use a series of set location points across the airfield as the locations where they observe wildlife. The number of points and location of those points are specific to your airfield and its attractants, so coordinate with your BASH program manager, wildlife biologist, or your natural resources office to establish points if your airfield does not have point count locations. These locations should remain consistent over time for data analysis purposes. Once collected, the data can be used to visualize wildlife behavior and usage trends over time. This is a great resource to use when advocating for airfield improvement projects to enhance the BASH program. Once you have objective data showing that you have a documented wildlife hazard, it is much easier to advocate for solutions and funding. Personnel conducting surveys should, at a minimum, know how to identify the common wildlife species known to be in their area of responsibility. Anyone can conduct surveys. However, a specific type of survey called a wildlife hazard assessment can only be conducted by a qualified airport wildlife biologist. We will talk about wildlife hazard assessments in another video. It is always a good idea to take photos and videos of the hazards you observe. They can be a valuable resource in communicating identified hazards to people who are not familiar with wildlife biology, including your installation leadership and other decision makers. Ensure proper permissions are obtained prior to taking photos or videos on the installation. Recommended tools for conducting wildlife surveys include a camera, binoculars, radio equipment, local wildlife identification guides, and something to record your survey data with. These can be as simple as a pen and paper or as advanced as a smart device paired with a GPS or a survey app. For ease of use, attachment 2 in DAFI 91-212 is a bird survey data sheet you can print and use when conducting formal wildlife surveys. This data sheet is also available on our BASH Air Force portal site under Survey Data Sheets and is titled Bird Survey Data Sheet. For night surveys, you will want a forward-looking infrared camera, otherwise known as a FLIR camera. This is a great tool to identify wildlife on your airfield at night and are much more effective tools when compared to night vision goggles. A powerful spotlight is also a good tool for night surveys and may assist in identifying an animal observed with a FLIR. Finally, survey personnel should have harassment and depredation tools on hand when conducting formal surveys. If wildlife is posing a threat to safe operations, the formal survey stops and the wildlife must be managed. Personnel should record the direct control methods used and species harassed in a separate document that will not be included in the formal Wildlife Survey Program data. The locations for surveys should be the same or similar as the ones used in the wildlife hazard assessments done at your installation and should include areas that are attractive to wildlife such as ponds, drainage culverts, and nearby housing. This is to ensure continuity of data in order to effectively track wildlife use of the airfield over time. This guides decision-making at the safety office and at higher levels of leadership. To summarize, the Air Force's formal wildlife survey program will, at a minimum, have survey point count stations that remain somewhat consistent over time. Conduct daytime surveys at least twice a month and nighttime wildlife surveys at least once a month. Record incidental large mammal observations. Conduct small mammal surveys twice a year, and record incidental wildlife observations made during patrols or while driving between survey points. Thank you for watching this video on conducting wildlife surveys on installations. We hope you found this video useful. Feel free to reach out to the AFSEC BASH team at any time for help. You can also find BASH information and resources on our AFSEC BASH webpage and on the Air Force portal.